At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. In the end, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it this way. My name's GeneralG. Let's begin. Cold air filled the grotto. Emil Moreno's world shrank to the glowing filament in his hand, and the light-absorbing pitted metal beneath it. The probe tip quivered, a frantic motion mirroring the tremor in his fingers. A drop of sweat rolled from his hairline, a cold track against his temple. "Status, Emmy!" Staff Sergeant Adani's words sliced through the power converter's high-pitched whine, a flat, calm line against the frantic pulse in his ears. He kept his gaze fixed. A glance away would shatter his focus. "Working on it," he rasped. He hated the sound. His tone once commanded lecture halls. Now it scraped like rust on steel. "There's a coping mechanism. I need a status report." Her boots scraped the rock floor. She was closer now. Her solid presence settled behind him. "The patrol sweep is in 20. We're either out of this hole with our prize, or we're a red smear for their morning report." "I know the schedule, Sergeant." He nudged the probe a micron to the left. His wrist spasmed. A familiar, panicked vibration. The ghost of a shockwave that lived in his bones. Heat, pressure, and screams. The echoes never faded. The terminus event. His own private recurring apocalypse. The sensorate seed mine, an ugly, functional thing shaped like a fat metal turnip, sat on his workbench, like a patient awaiting vivisection. The crash weeks ago scoured its matte gray casing. The team hauled it a click and a half from the sensorate supply drone's wreckage. A crawl through rock and scree that left their muscles shot and their resolve frayed. The real prize lay inside, the compact, miraculously intact IFF emitter nestled in its guts. They disarmed its flechette warhead, a small mercy. "Just another millimeter," he muttered to himself. He worked to bypass a logic gate, isolating the emitter from the detonator train. One slip, one jolt, and the failsafe would flash fry the entire circuit board into a useless ceramic wafer. He flinched, his hand jumping. The probe skittered across the board. A spray of actinic blue sparks erupted with a sharp crack. The converter whined down into silence. Red emergency lamps flickered on, casting their faces in demonic shades. "Damn it!" he breathed. The tremor flared into overdrive, shaking his entire arm. He dropped the probe onto the metal table with a clatter. She clamped her hand onto his wrist, an immense grip that pinned his arm to the table and stilled the violent shudder. He stared at the dead circuit board, at the black, smoking line where his probe slipped. Failure again. "Breathe, Emil." Her voice was flat, the command absolute. "You're here, in a cave on Cairn, with me." He shut his eyes, squeezing them tight. The acrid stink of fried ceramics thickened the air, but beneath it lay the scent of fused metal and burnt synthetics from the Icarus, the civilian transport he failed to save. "I fried it," he said. "Gone." "Is it?" She held his wrist fast. "You told me they built redundancies into everything, called them pathologically cautious." He opened his eyes. Her hand remained on his arm, knuckles white. The dark, calloused skin of her fingers, shaped by a rifle's grip, was a stark contrast to his own. She was the only other survivor from his unit at Terminus. She'd been there. The intel was bad, the bomb an unfamiliar type. His hesitation was born from solving an insoluble problem, while the brass screamed for a miracle. He took a breath, then another. He looked back at the board, at the vaporized primary trace, a scorched canyon in the green substrate. But next to it, a secondary bus, thinner, exposed, an option he hadn't seen before. "The diagnostic bus," he whispered. "A long shot. They built it for a whisper of a load." But it could? Maybe. Her grip steadied him. The glimmer of a new puzzle sharpened his focus. If I can reroute the emitter's power feed, it might hold, just for a second. A second is all you need, Adani said, easing her grip but keeping her hand on his arm. The patrol is in 15. Emil picked up another probe. His hand was steady. In the red gloom, he met her dark, intense eyes. Her expression held an expectation that cut deeper than pity. Right. He leaned back over the mine. Let's see what this thing can do. The governor's office was Coda Chasm's nicest hole, a real wood desk, salvaged from the colony's crashed lander. Faced a high-definition screen showing the sun-scorched valley outside. The view showed only rock walls and a sliver of bleached sky. Governor Jansen sat behind the desk, exhaustion deepening the lines around her eyes as she listened. Opposite her, Colonel Riggs, the ranking coalition military officer, stood with his arms folded across his chest. His immaculate uniform was a stark contrast to the dust coating everyone else. His rigid posture suggested procedure could hold back the tide. Emil felt small, a fraud with the dead mine on a dolly, its guts exposed. Adani remained a few feet behind him, solid and still. "Let me be clear, Mr. Moreno," Riggs said, his voice clipped. "You want to take the single most dangerous piece of enemy hardware on this planet, something my teams have spent weeks trying to figure out how to disable, and you want to, what? Turn it on?" "More than turn it on, Colonel." Emil found his voice, the rasp firming as he tapped a key on the datapad tethered to the mine. A holographic schematic bloomed in the air above it. Jansen leaned forward and stared at the hologram. "Sing?" "The IFF emitter," Emil explained, gesturing to a small component with dozens of flat, polished faces in the schematic. "The emitter broadcasts a simple friend or foe signal on a dozen different spectrums at once, across gravitic, magnetic, light, and radio. It's how the sensor its own troops and drones move through the minefield without their own ordnance tearing them apart." He zoomed in on the emitter. "But they wildly over-engineered the hardware. It can broadcast complex, layered data packets. They use top-of-the-line components because building with them was cheaper than designing a whole new system. Bureaucracy and budget cuts. Some things are universal." Riggs snorted. "Get to the point." "The point, Colonel, is that I can hijack that broadcast signal. I can write a new song." Emil looked from Riggs to Jansen. "Disarming the minefield is futile. It's a self-healing network. Take out one section and the others reroute. Instead, I can make every mine in that valley scream, 'I am a friendly tank convoy,' or 'I am a flight of incoming dropships,' or 'I am an entire army marching on your position all at once.'" He paused, letting his words settle. "I can flood their sensors with so many false positives they'll be blind. Long enough for us to get the civilian transports out of the chasm." He gave his plan its name. "A distraction, a light show, a fireworks display." Riggs stared at him, his expression impassive. "You want to turn a lethal minefield into fireworks?" "Big, beautiful fireworks that save 3,000 lives," Emil said, a flicker of his old confidence returning. "Yes." Jansen steepled her fingers, her gaze sharp. "What are the risks?" "Well, the risks," Riggs cut in, "are that he shorts the network and detonates 10,000 mines, wiping Coda Prospect off the map. Or the sensor it realizes what we're doing and uses his network to send its own kill signal. This man is a disgraced EOD tech with a history of hesitation." The word hit him, and he flinched, the tremor buzzing to life in his right hand. He clenched it into a fist, hiding it at his side. Adani took half a step forward, a weight shift that broke her rigid posture. "The Terminus report cited faulty intelligence as a contributing factor, Colonel." Adani's voice was low, each word spaced with deliberate calm. Riggs narrowed his eyes. "And a field operator's failure to act in a timely manner, Sergeant. I've read the file." "Then you've read a lie," Adani said. Jansen held up a hand, silencing them both. "Emil, can you do it?" They all looked at him, the politician, the soldier, his friend. The weight of their gazes pressed down, and the tremor in his hand became a dull ache, reminding him of his last spectacular failure. "Yes," he said. The word came out stronger than he expected. "The theory is sound. The hardware is vulnerable. I can do it, but I need resources, a secure lab, power, access to our long-range comms array to piggyback the signal." Jansen looked at the valley's live feed, at the silent, sun-baked rock where 10,000 deaths slept. She looked at Riggs, his jaw set, a muscle twitching near his eye. Then she turned back to Emil. "Colonel Riggs," she said, her voice firm, "give Mr. Moreno what he needs. That's an order." Riggs's jaw tightened. He gave a nod so sharp it became an insult. "Governor." He turned and strode from the office. She regarded Emil, her gaze softening. "Son," she said, her voice losing its official tone, "I just bet 3,000 lives on a piece of driftwood. Show me I picked the right one." "I'll prove you right," Emil promised, as much to himself as to her. The lab was a repurposed hydroponics bay deep in the colony's heart. The sterile metal room's air hung thick with the ghost smell of soil and nutrient solution. Wires coiled across the floor, connecting Emil's workbench to the colony's central power grid and comm suite. The single seed mine, their Rosetta key, sat like an altar at the center. For 3 days, Emil and Adani worked. He lost track of time, living off protein gruel and the nervous energy that kept sleep at bay. His universe shrank to solder points and lines of code. He drafted the Fireworks program's core, a recursive loop of ghost signals designed to replicate and spread through the sensorit's mesh network, commandeering IFF emitters one by one. The code was elegant, malicious, quite possibly the best work of his life. She ran power conduits, fabricated custom tools from scrap metal, including a custom-milled heatsink she'd machined from a transport's brake pad, and stood guard. When the tremor started in his hands, she wordlessly handed him a heavy wrench or power coupler, forcing him to use larger muscle groups and ground himself in a physical task until the fine motor tremors subsided. She remained silent about Terminus, always. "Ready for the first test," he announced, his voice raw from disuse. He sat before a diagnostic-filled console. A single green light, representing their captive mine, blinked on the valley's projected topographical map. "Small scale," he told Adani, who stood behind him, arms folded across her chest. "I'm holding back the fireworks code. I'm sending a simple handshake, a whisper instead of a shout." "Whisper away," she said. He took a breath. A tremor ran through his right index finger as it hovered over the activation key. He switched hands and pressed it. On the screen, a line of code scrolled by. "Handshake, pulse, sent." They waited. The ventilation system hummed, filling the quiet. 1 second, 2, 5. "Anything?" Adani asked. "Patience," he mumbled, staring at the monitor. "The network is slow, cautious." Then a new line of text appeared. "Echo response received." A second green light appeared on the map, a few hundred meters from the first, faint and flickering. Emil exhaled a held breath. "We're in. It answered." He grinned, a real, unfamiliar expression, pulling at his tight facial muscles. "The bastard answered." Adani clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Good. Now what?" "Now we listen." He tapped out new commands. "It's sending more than a yes-no response. It's sending back a full diagnostic packet. Power levels, sensor status, firmware version. Holy hell!" "What is it?" The power network, look! He brought up a new schematic, a web of interconnected lines. They draw energy from each other, like a single organism. If I inject my code into one, it'll have the whole field's power grid. This was the key, better than he'd hoped. The system's greatest strength, its interconnected self-healing network, was also its greatest weakness. He could turn its own circulatory system against it. He typed, modifying the fireworks code, adapting it to spread through data links and the energy-sharing protocols. The work steadied his hands. He forgot the tremor. He was so focused, a small amber icon, an alert from the colony's perimeter sensors, flashed twice on his screen before it registered. Adani saw it too. What's that? Emil clicked it. The main sensor feed filled the screen. A view from a high-gain optical array pointed at the sensor at Command Spire, looming over the valley's far end. Magnifying, a section of the spire's wall resolved. A launch bay door slid open. A sensorate drone, a sleek, angular machine like a shred of polished jet, detached from the spire and flew a slow patrol pattern. Its path took it away from the colony, toward the minefield's edge, right where they had just pinged the network. It saw the whisper, Adani said, her voice low. The back of his neck went cold. How? The network's background noise should have hidden it. Maybe they're more sensitive than you thought, she said. Or maybe their commander is intelligent. The drone continued its slow search. Like a predator, sensing a tremor in the ground, it shifted its course. The tremor returned to Emil's hand, a cold, familiar poison. He underestimated his opponent, who now looked right at him. The Proctor observed the data stream. Its command throne was a suspension cable deep within the sensorate spire reactor core, a web of nutrient feeds and data conduits that plugged directly into its consciousness. A being of woven biocircuitry and living nerve tissue, the Proctor was a vast, sentient ganglion housed within an articulated chassis of black alloy and synth muscle. Its movements were economical, each gesture a silent command. The pulsing light from the spire's fusion heart cast shifting organic patterns across its semi-translucent shell. To the Proctor, the Codachasm's minefield network was a symphony of perfect ordered logic. 10,000 instruments, each playing its part in harmonious silence. The data flowed in predictable, elegant patterns. Power levels ebbed and flowed with the planet's diurnal cycle. Sensor inputs registered the scuttling of native fauna, the wind's whisper, the moon's subtle gravitational pull. All was as it should be. Almost. An anomaly, a single discordant note in the symphony. The anomaly was infinitesimally small, a data packet from Mine Unit Kilo 9 that contained a fractional power deviation, a nanosecond of latency in its response protocol. To a lesser intelligence, it would be noise, a ghost in the machine. The Proctor dismissed ghosts, believing only in causality. It reran the diagnostic logs for the past shift. There, the anomaly coincided with a rogue network handshake. The network classified the source as a dormant unit, logged as destroyed during a recent supply transport crash. The mine had, for a single moment, come back to life, spoken to its nearest neighbor, and then fallen silent again. The event was a contradiction. Therefore, the event was deliberate. The humans, the persistent, illogical pests sheltering in the chasm, they were resourceful. The Proctor would grant them that. They survived far longer than its projections indicated. It cross-referenced the dormant mine's location with the colony's position. A team salvaged it. They were probing the network for a weakness, a foolish, predictable endeavor. The network was perfect. Still, it must exterminate such pests, leaving them to their work-wasted resources. The Proctor processed the command, Its articulated manipulators traced patterns over a console of solid light. It dispatched a signal, a Spectre-class drone detached from the spire. Its orders were simple: investigate the location of Unit Kylo 9, observe, report. If it detected human activity, it held authorization to sterilize the area. The Proctor refocused on the minefield symphony. It addressed the discordant note and would restore order. The humans' desperate little schemes were an expected variable, a final, futile thrashing before the inevitable. They were an equation that could only resolve to zero. "It's changing its search pattern," Adani said, her voice tight. She gripped the viewscreen console's edge. "It's vectoring directly on the grotto." A frantic pulse hammered in Emil's chest. "How could they know we were there? We covered our tracks." "They have a better way," he muttered, the facts connecting with a jolt. "The ping. It originated from our test mine, which was physically here. But I bounced the signal off the comms array to make it look like it came from the grotto's location. The drone will find an empty cave. And when it does, it reports back. The Proctor, or whatever they call their commander, will know the signal was a spoof and deduce it came from inside the colony." Emil ran a trembling hand through his hair. "It'll deduce we have one of their minds and what we're trying to do." "So, what's the move?" Adani asked. She turned from the screen to face him. Her expression was hard, focused. "Do we scrub the plan? Go dark?" "No!" The word was out before he'd even thought it through. "If we go dark now, they'll just clamp down. They'll change the network's encryption keys, push a security patch. We'll lose our only way in. This is our one shot." "So we accelerate." Her tone was certain. "We accelerate," he confirmed. "We go loud. Right now." He turned back to his console. The prototype code was nearly complete, but riddled with raw, reckless routines. "I'm loading the full fireworks package," he said, keying a rapid sequence. "I'll push it to Unit Kylo 9 and tell it to spread the signal. A scream this time." "You said that would alert them instantly." "It will. They'll see the infection spreading in real time. The Proctor will try shutting it down, initiating a system-wide firmware patch to wipe the network clean. It's what I would do." "And how long does that give us?" Emil finished the last line of code and initiated the upload sequence. "The network is vast, even with their processing power. A forced patch to 10,000 units will take time. My best guess, 20 minutes, maybe 25 if we're lucky." 25 minutes for what?" "To get the transports off the ground and clear the valley's airspace," he said, watching a progress bar crawl across his screen. "The fireworks will blind them, but only while the code is active. Once the patch hits, the mines go back to normal, and their sensors come back online. Anything still in the valley will be a sitting duck." A new alert flashed. Governor Jansen's face appeared in a comms window. "Mr. Moreno, what's happening? Colonel Riggs is reporting a sensorite drone dangerously close to our perimeter." "It's my fault, Governor," Emil said, keeping his eyes on the upload. "They've detected my initial probe. I have to escalate. The plan is go. Now." Jansen's face paled. "Now? Our people are still in their shelters. The launch sequence is cold." "We're out of time," Emil cut in. "Tell the civilians to get to the transport bays. Tell Riggs to get his fighters in the air to provide cover. You have 25 minutes. Go!" He cut the connection before she could argue. The upload finished. Package transfer complete. Emil took a deep, shaky breath. He hovered his hand over the final command key. Execute. This was the precipice. A tremor seized his hand. The ghost of Terminus was right there, whispering in his ear. "You'll fail. They'll die. It will be your fault." Adani settled her hand on his shoulder. Her grip was firm. "Press the damn button, Emmy." He pressed it. On the large projection tank, the tactical map glowed as a wave of color exploded from their single green dot. It pulsed outwards, a ripple of chaotic data, turning the adjacent dots from green to a brilliant flashing gold. 1 became 2, 2 became 8, 8 grew to 32. The infection was spreading. On another screen, a dozen new alerts popped up as the colony's sensor arrays went haywire. "It's working!" a tech crackled over the comms. "Sir, we're picking up everything. Multiple tank divisions moving on the west flank, an entire armored company on the east. Wait, now I'm seeing orbital drop signatures, dozens of them. Those readings are false." "They're ghosts," Emil laughed, a wild, giddy sound bubbling in his chest. "Ha ha ha ha! They're fireworks!" Then a new icon appeared on the tactical map, a deep, clinical red, originating from the sensor at Spire. It spread through the minefield's network, following the same paths as his golden wave, a wave of digital bleach, erasing his code as it went. The firmware patch. It spread faster than he'd anticipated. "Adani," he said, his voice turning grim. "New estimate. Our window is smaller than 25 minutes. He pointed at the screen, at the red tide chasing his gold. "We have 10. Adani stared at the screen, her knuckles white on the back of his chair. "The transports need more than 10 minutes to spool up." The patch was propagating from the Spire, the central hub. "It's using the high bandwidth conduits," he said, his voice tight. "It has the highway. I'm stuck on the back roads." His code was spreading peer to peer. He was winning at the field's edges, but the sensorate was winning in the core. The patch would inevitably overwhelm his signal. Unless I sever the connection at its source," he whispered. He brought up the network schematic again. A series of regional hubs managed the entire minefield. Densely shielded, subterranean nodes he'd seen in the mine's own schematics. They called them conduits. They regulated power and pushed network-wide commands from the Spire. "If I physically sever a conduit from the main network," he said, thinking aloud, "I can isolate a whole section of the minefield. I'll block the patch signal. My fireworks code will lock in, propagating freely within that isolated section." "Isolate how much?" Adani asked. "If I hit the main conduit for this quadrant, maybe a third of the field. 3,000 mines, all screaming ghost signals, concentrated on the evacuation corridor. It would be enough." He located the nearest conduit on the map, 2 clicks away at the minefield's edge, buried 3 meters under rocky soil. "How do you physically sever a buried data hub in less than 10 minutes? Emil looked up from the screen and grabbed a direct injection tool from his workbench, a heavy piston-driven device designated to pierce armored casings. "You bypass the rock," he said, hefting the tool. "You go through the mine." Adani stared, her eyes wide. "You want to detonate a mine right on top of the conduit?" "Overload it. I need to cook its power cell. Hot enough to melt the conduit's access port and expose the fiber optic link to the main grid. Then I use this," he shook the injection tool, "to sever it." "That's insane," she breathed. "Yes," he agreed. The red tide on the map claimed a quarter of the network. "We have 8 minutes. Get the Jeep." The Jeep was a skeleton of roll cage and engine. Adani wrestled the wheel, sending the vehicle bucking and skidding over rocks and through gullies. The motion threw Emil against his harness as he clutched the injection tool and a modified data pad. The wind roared in his ears, whipping dust and grit into his face. 6 minutes! He yelled over the engine's scream. On his data pad, the red wave consumed his golden network. "I see it!" Adani shouted back. Ahead, low, gray cairns marked the ground, warning markers their own survey teams placed months ago. The minefield's edge. His map showed the conduit directly beneath a rock cluster 50 meters ahead. "I'm designating the target mine Echo 4, he said, as he keyed commands into the datapad. He sent a command through his hacked network, a specific instruction for a single mine. I'm telling it to draw excess power from its neighbors. It'll turn it into a hot plate. Just tell me when to stop. Now! Adani slammed the brakes. The Jeep fishtailed to a halt in a cloud of dust, just meters from the first warning cairn. They sat exposed, an easy target for any censored patrols. Emil jumped out, the injection tool heavy in his hand. Keep the engine running! He ran towards the spot his datapad indicated, his boots crunching on the loose gravel. The valley's silence pressed in after the Jeep's roar. 1,000 dormant threats lay under his feet. A frantic rhythm hammered against his ribs. "Overload sequence initiated," he said into his comms, his eyes on the datapad. "It's working! The cell temperature is climbing!" A low hum vibrated up through the soles of his boots. The ground in front of him glowed, a dull, angry red sweeping up through the rock's cracks. The air shimmered with heat. "Come on, you bastard!" he grunted. "Give!" With a deep, resonant thump, a volcanic surge erupted from the ground. A geyser of molten rock and superheated soil fountained into the air, revealing a dark, circular object beneath it, the conduit. Its armored casing glowed cherry red, the access panel he targeted sagging and partially melted. Emil shielded his face from the heat wave. The overpowering smell of burnt stone and superheated silica filled the air. He scrambled forward into the blistering heat radiating from the exposed conduit. His facial skin tightened. He dropped to his knees beside the glowing metal. The access panel was a misshapen wreck, but a gap appeared, an opening into the hub's guts. The core throbbed with a rhythmic blood-red light, and running into it, a thick shielded fiber optic cable, the umbilical cord to the main grid. His hands, they were shaking again. The tremor possessed him. The heat, the adrenaline, the proximity to 1,000 live explosives, the pressure brought Terminus back with a vengeance. The flash, the pressure wave, the world blurred at the edges. "Emmy, 4 minutes!" Adani's voice, sharp in his ear, cut through the noise in his head. He gripped the injection tool, aiming its needle-sharp tip at the cable. He fought to hold it steady. The tip danced in the air, clinking against the superheated casing, missing the cable. He gasped, the superheated air searing his lungs. The tremor seized him. "It won't stay still!" He would fail. 3,000 people would die because of his shaking hands. He looked at his trembling hands, silhouetted against the conduit's red glow. Useless, betrayers. In his rage and frustration, he shoved his left hand against the conduit's glowing metal casing to steady himself. Searing pain exploded up his arm. He screamed, a raw, ragged sound torn from his throat. The smell of his own cooking flesh filled his nostrils. The pain was blinding, honest, a real agony to burn out the phantom one. In that instant, the blast wave's ghost, the memory of screaming, the years of doubt, the present's clean, sharp shock burned them all away. His world narrowed to the agony in his left hand and the tool in his right. His right hand was perfectly still. He leveled the injection tool. He aimed for the thick fiber optic cable. He squeezed the trigger. The injector hissed. The piston fired with a solid thunk. The hardened tip punched through the cable shielding, severing the connection in a shower of sparks. The blood-red light in the conduit's core flickered, died, and then flared back to life, a brilliant, chaotic gold. He scrambled back from the heat, clutching his ruined hand to his chest. The pain was immense. He looked at his datapad. On the map, a full third of the valley was a solid, pulsing wall of gold. The censored patch's red tide hit the severed connection and stopped dead. The isolated network was his, 3,000 minds all singing his song. Behind him, a new engine roar filled the air, deeper than the Jeeps. He looked up. 3 massive civilian transports rose from Coda Chasm's hidden mouth. They were clumsy, Vulnerable things. A swarm of nimble coalition fighters followed them, peeling off to engage the censored drones that were just now swarming from the spire, drawn from the sudden eruption of activity. The sky above the valley floor dissolved into a chaotic mess of sensor ghosts. Emil's fireworks worked. The Sensorit's targeting network, choked by the volume of Emil's ghost signals, turned on itself as automated fire lashed out an empty sky. Adani was at his side, hauling him to his feet. "Come on, you crazy bastard! Let's go!" She half-dragged him back to the jeep. As they sped away, Emil looked back over his shoulder. The transport climbed, ponderously but steadily, toward the upper atmosphere's safety. The Sensorit's response was a confused flurry of automated fire lashing out at empty sky. And he looked at his hand. The pain was a roaring fire, but he held it steady. From the Coda's command deck, the valley below shimmered with the strobing pulses of thousands of hijacked minds. Emil sat in a medbay chair by the observation window, his left hand a bundle of white synth flesh and bandages. A cocktail of painkillers kept the pain to a dull, persistent throb, but his right, resting on the chair's arm, was perfectly still. Adani stood beside him, leaning against the viewport, watching the last transport clear the mountain peaks. The colony's fighters were disengaging, their job done, and raced to catch up with the convoy. "Governor Jansen sends her thanks," Adani said, still looking outside, "and her apologies for ever doubting you. Riggs is quiet. I think you broke his brain." Emil managed a weak smile. "He'll get over it." For a few minutes, only the ship's quiet hum sounded as Cairn shrank below them, a sphere of rust and ochre streaked with Coda Chasm's brown slash. The Sensorit spire shrank to a tiny needle on its surface. 10,000 ways to die down there," Adani murmured, her eyes still fixed on the shrinking planet. She turned to look at him, a rare, genuine smile touching her lips. "And you made them dance." Emil looked down at his bandaged hand, then back out at the stars appearing in the blackness of space. The real healing ache from the burn replaced the old ghosts. He saved 3,000 people and found something to hold on to. "Yeah," he said, his voice clear and steady. "We did." His hands were still. The show was over. That was enough.